Hey everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd, you know who it is, and it's time for a review of the new Billy Woods album, Known Unknowns. Now, Billy Woods, if you aren't aware, is one of the most shadowy, elusive, and enigmatic rappers in the underground today. Numerous solid projects under this dude's belt, Dour Candy, History Will Absolve Me, Today I Wrote Nothing, also has a duo with fellow MC Elucid. Armand Hammer has also performed in the Supercron Flight Brothers. Billy Woods has a really unique delivery, unique voice, cryptic lyrical style, and I was really excited to listen to and talk about this new album over here. I didn't get right into it the moment I knew it came out because Billy Woods, his records usually take a while to digest. I wanted to give it the time that it needed to kind of move its way through my brain, and also I wanted to take this opportunity to collaboratively review and talk about this new record with fellow Billy Woods appreciator and YouTube music reviewer, Mr. Myke Seatown of Dead End Hip Hop fame. Him and I basically discussed some of the ins and outs and the appeals of this new Billy Woods album. And yeah, we're going to get into that conversation right now. I hope you enjoy it. Hope you enjoy this new Billy Woods album too. Check it out. Give it a shot. And let's transition. And here we are through the magic of the internet with Mr. Myke Seatown of Dead End Hip Hop and his own YouTube legend status as well, where he does reviews and vinyl updates and whatnot. Thanks for coming on, talking with me about this new Billy Woods record, Known Unknowns. How you doing, dude?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for inviting me, man.
No problem. You and I both heard Billy's last record, and the record before that, and the record before that. I think you're the only music reviewer on YouTube who has kept up as intently with his output as I have. So, I thought it would be good to talk with you about this new record over here. Given what you knew of his progression up until this point, how did this album sort of hit you in comparison with like his past work?
The first thing I thought of when I listened to it the first time through is it's a bit more varied than his last couple of albums. I mean, his albums are all really moody, but it seemed like this time the mood was still really consistent, but the tone was varied. Do you know what I mean?
Okay.
Like the production was all very different. It wasn't all one sound.
And production from Blockhead, we should say that. He did do production on Dour Candy from front to back. He also did that on this new one over here. I will say if there is sort of a comparative difference between those two records, just production-wise, this one to me on the whole seems a bit punchier. There were a lot of beats on Candy that were a little stripped back, kind of skeletal, like you say, moody. But there were a lot of tracks on here that, read as a little bit more aggressive to me just because the percussion seemed a little bit more prominent, the samples and the melody seemed a little bit more vivid, and I think Billy sort of upped the volume and the intensity of his delivery occasionally too, to sort of match that energy. But I do agree, it is varied in terms of mood. There are a lot of tracks on here like Nomento, the Source Awards track, another song toward the end where he's essentially rapping about, I guess, kind of being like a bad other half in a relationship. He has like these women in his life who are sort of just kind of in and out, sort of like a revolving door because he sort of comes off as like an undependable partner or just like not really a partner who's not really present. If anything sort of hit me about this record, it's that he comes off as like the ultimate loner poet. You know? Like it's very much like, I don't know, it's very much like an isolationist rap record in a lot of ways. It seems like really dirty, tear stained, coffee stained, like little bit of weed bits in there, caught in there in the diary. And, it's just like a really filthy, grimy diary that he's just like kind of filling up with, all this like pen ink spilled everywhere too. Again, definitely like a loner's hip hop record.
Yeah, it definitely feels, I don't like to call it pessimistic, but I guess it's more just darker / realistic, I guess. Like he gives a really bleak feeling of what it's like to be just a black dude living in America. And it's not a beat you over the head type of message, but you still take that from it because there's a lot of social issues that he talks about regularly. But with this one, I just like that he's doing it in different ways. Like you can go from Bush League, to the song like Wonderful to like Groundhog's Day. Like those songs all sound so different, but they still have the same type of mood. And I think he did that really, really well here.
He did do that. And also on these tracks, even though he does sort of address these serious topics and he comes through with these moods, he still drops those lines every once in a while that are just like super fucking funny. Or just like, you know, just like super dark humor. You know, you brought up Bush League. One of the first lines on that track that hit me was when he was rapping about, you know, is this your first time in the killing field? We're not trying to reinvent the wheel. Like, you know, that's just like one of those really matter-of-factly, very frank moments in his lines where he just like kind of screams out this like, this is the bullshit. This is how it is, you know? And it's like, you either just like shit or get off the pot. You either deal with it or you don't, you know? And it's like, I love those moments in his lines, because as dark as his songs can get, they just kind of make me laugh, because it's just like, you know, I really don't know how else to explain it. He's just so boldly and bluntly and brashly just highlighting this really horrible stuff in a way that's like he can't really do anything else other than to have like kind of a laugh at it. And also I kind of think that's all the case for the song Source Awards, where I don't know where that track is coming from. It seems like a really weird cartoony power fantasy where he finds himself at the Source Awards,
right?
And he's like running up on these other rappers, and he's just like, you know, threatening people, saying he's the best, saying he has the best music, and talking about, you know, other debauchery that's going on there. You know, some of the stuff he raps about is clearly based in the reality of sort of these societal inequalities that you're talking about. Also the reality of, you know, these romantic relationships he finds himself in going south, or, you know, at a point where he finds himself alone. And sometimes, you know, what he raps about seems to come from a place of, you know, just these really weird satirical fantasies that he drums up just to kind of highlight an issue or make fun of something. Sort of another whiff of reality that comes on the record was definitely Police Came to My Show. But that's also a track where he clearly kind of takes a bit of a lighthearted tone to it, you know? Like, as he's rapping about the police coming to his show and just everything that was going on at this concert, like, it's really tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah, because he even mentions the fact that he sold no merch.
Yes.
I forget the exact line, but he says something like, after selling no merch, then he starts talking about the police. And the whole idea of the song is so absurd. These cops who show up and they actually pay to get in. But Billy Woods is so coded sometimes, or it kind of goes over my head a little bit, but I'm still not quite sure what he's saying the cops were there for.
Yeah, exactly. But that's the thing. It's sort of like they could be there for something. They could not be there for something. And also I think it adds up to this sense of paranoia on the album too, you know, that comes through on songs like Everybody Knows. You know, that's like an incredibly dark track where he's rapping about not only people sort of in his immediate neighborhood that are aware of his actions, you know, because there are moments on the album and in past records too where he's rapping about stuff like dealing and sort of the seedy and the dangerous lifestyle that comes along with that. But he's also rapping about things like, you know, Big Brother coming in the shape of an app on your iPad or something like that. So it's kind of like, you know, this local paranoia, but then this grander sense of paranoia too. You know, but again, it's the details of why the police were there at the show doesn't so much hit you, or doesn't so much reveal itself as much as like little details, like when he's talking about that kid who's half his age trying to trade tapes with him. Like, hey, I have my tape. Can I get your tape? He's like, I don't even have a tape player, you know? You know, but also another moment on that Everybody Knows track, you know, a spot when he's, you know, dropping a bit of like really sharp and dark humor in the middle of like this like horrifying song, is when he's talking about I think that one line when he's talking about, you know, the people who he's watching out for, giving him a gift he doesn't want, and then the very next bar you have that sound effect where ho ho ho, you know, like Santa is like, you know, like coming down the chimney or whatever, and he's like, and as soon as, you know, you hear the ho ho ho, he's like, that's how they laugh, you know, and then he goes into the next bar. Again, it's just so funny, and we haven't sort of gone into this detail yet, because we're sort of familiar with his previous stuff. You know, we haven't established it, but, you know, he continues really well with this whole rap style that's completely unique to him, where he's half rapping but also half ranting. Yeah. You know, there's like a flow to it, but he's also kind of like just yelling into the air like a crazed psycho who you might see sort of like pacing up and down a New York street or something.
Yeah, and that's always what really drew me to Billy Woods. Is I came up listening to all that weird New York rap. And it's very rare to find someone that's still doing experimental rap, but differently than everybody else. And literally, I can't think of anyone that sounds like Billy Woods. And you're absolutely right. It's because his rhyme style is it's so unique and it's so unorthodox. Like he'll be rapping at one point and then it'll just sound like he's doing like some weird spoken word, like you said, or just talking to somebody, but it's still weirdly on beat.
No, it absolutely is. And, you know, he's doing it just as well here as he has in the past. You know, there was one moment where I think where he really sort of dug into his lower register and sort of shouted with, you know, kind of this authoritative tone. And it reminded me of like Ride, just like a little bit. But really beyond that, there's like really no comparison. I mean, the features on here, for the most part, I was pretty impressed with. Aesop Rock and Homeboy Sandman on a Wonderful were excellent. Like, that was an excellent compliment to him.
I agree. That was one of my favorite tracks, actually.
Yeah, it is one of the better tracks on here. Like, it has a really good momentum to it, good energy, good intensity, and the way that they play off of each other is really well. Is really good. And it's easily one of the better feature verses I've heard from Homeboy Sandman. Like, he's not typically a rapper I go out of my way to hear, but he did a lot for this song, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. He had some line about kicking ass, and he said something about my steel toes got a lot of mileage.
Yeah.
And, you know, you're right. I like Homeboy Sandman, but if he's featured on a song, I don't typically jump to say, okay, he's going to murder this track.
Yeah.
But I think what was so good about Wonderful is all three of the MCs on that song sounded so drastically different that it just worked really well. Like, none of them have a similar rhyme pattern.
No.
So it just worked out really well. And the beat was a little bit more up-tempo than everything else. So I thought that made the song stick out in a good way.
Another thing that really stuck out to me, what did you think of the track Straw Man, which sort of had that, like, thumping, slow
singers.
grooving, like, you know, it had the singers, but it also kind of had like that rock guitar bass line on there, which was like a really weird direction for Billy to go in.
And it's funny because that was actually one of the questions I had to ask you.
Yeah.
Because it was, okay, I'll get it out the way. That was the only song on the whole album that I didn't like.
Really?
And it was to the point where I was listening to it over and over again because I wanted to like it. And the reason I wanted to like it is I don't want to put Billy Woods in a box and say, okay, he tried to do something a little bit different, and here I am, the super fan that doesn't like it. I didn't want to be that guy, but unfortunately, I end up being that guy because I don't think it was necessarily a bad song. I think people that like that type of beat and that type of hook, I think they would dig it, but from my personal taste, I felt like it stuck out like a sore thumb, and it just didn't work for me.
You know, there are things about the track that I like. There's things about the track that I dislike. It did stick out to me instrumentally as just kind of like a sore thumb. Like, it didn't fit in with the overall tone of the record.
Right.
I think Billy's performance on the track was pretty decent. Barry McLean's hook on there, I didn't care for it all that much. It just kind of seemed like this stereotypical R&B vibe, but I actually liked her vocals a lot on the closing track. I love the tone of her voice and sort of the melody she was pulling off on the closing track. I actually didn't care for the guest rapper on the track either, especially when he sort of kicked off his verse singing, but also kind of stepping on the end of Billy's verse. It just seemed like a little bit of a traffic jam, you know? Like, it didn't seem like the song was organized as well as it could have potentially been. You know, and Billy, he's not the most ambitious when it comes to structure. You know, he's typically like, just get a really good verse out there or a good intro, then hit him with like a repeated hook, you know, that's just like, sometimes, you know, you have tracks like Snake Oil, in my opinion, or tracks like Fall Back that the hook is a little clunky, you know, it's almost like a chunk of a rap verse, and he's just like kind of just spitting a refrain just to give you like a little bit of space before the next verse comes. You know, I do wish some of the hooks on here were a little bit sharper. Here's a moment where it struck me as like, okay, you know, he's trying, but like it's falling a little short. You know, and not that it didn't have potential. You know, I do like the lead melody of the hook. You know, I do like Billy's performance. I do like the idea of sort of rapping over the groove that the song presented. But, you know, again, it does stick out sort of like a sore thumb and not in the best way. Yeah,
I agree with you 100%. I didn't care for the guest rapper, and forgive me, I don't remember the person's name.
Googie.
Oh, Googie.
Yes.
And that's somebody that people have told me to check out before. I just haven't got around to it. But I didn't think the chemistry between Billy, Googie, or Barry on that song worked at all.
Yeah.
I thought when Billy did his own hooks, or even when Elucid did the hooks for him, I thought it sounded really good.
Yeah.
And I thought these were some of his better hooks that he's had on his albums. It was almost like he's trying a little bit harder to get in your head and be a little bit more catchy. I'm a little worried, or that song made me a little bit worried that he might start pulling in people like this to do hooks for him, and I don't think that would be a great idea.
Yeah. You know, I do agree. You know, he did try, and he does have some of his better hooks on here. This album is a bit more hook focused, which I think plays along into the overall record feeling a bit punchier, a bit more aggressive, a bit more straightforward. Those moments where Elucid is on the record, he appears on here twice. I believe. You know, obviously they've worked together before on numerous tracks. They've worked together in Arm & Hammer, so that chemistry is there. It comes through with flying colors, so, you know, the Elucid tracks are excellent, to be expected. You know, but the other moments when he is by himself and doing his own hooks, for the most part, they do stick in my head too. You know, as I guess I guess off the cuff as some of them might seem, as like I wake up and smoke weed. I wake up and smoke weed. But the thing is, like, when you really dive into that track, you sort of see like the really weird, isolated sort of tone of the song, and the fact that he's surrounded by all this junk, and you know, he sort of finds himself in this rut, you know, on the song. You know, and also to go back to Everybody Knows, you know, he's like, they know who you are, they know who you are, you know, and just kind of that sense of paranoia sort of getting more and more tense in his voice as he's sort of repeating the line over and over and over, you know. So while some of the hooks here do work, they're not your average hook. You know, they're there to sort of establish a mood and sort of, you know, set into the listener, you know, a certain kind of emotion that the rest of the song is trying to build up. It's not merely just meant to stick in your head.
Right. And I thought that, like the hook that he had on Tupac Jackets. Yeah. I'm not sure if,
that one has Elucid on it too.
Yeah. Where, you know, I liked how, especially on the hook, where they took the idea of thug and kind of twisted the line around. Because, I mean, we all know that Tupac had a certain idea of what thug life meant for. It wasn't just thug life. So I thought that the highest under, the way Elucid was doing that, and it didn't even click until way later on, after listening to the album a bunch of times, that he was referencing the word thug. And it was, from what I took it, and I was going to actually email him and ask him if this was correct, was the highest under God. Did you get that from that song?
I didn't, but the thing is, that sort of adds up to the quality of Billy Wood's music, that sort of like on the end of the song Snake Oil, where, you know, he sort of ends off that track saying he's got a mouthful of riddles. You know, like his albums from front to back are just so cryptic. And that's just kind of the tone that, you know, they're at. But what's funny is, like, when you actually figure it out, when you actually figure each track out, you're like, oh, that's what that is. Like, it should have been obvious from the start, you know, because the thing is, all the clues and all of the imagery, it's all there. It's just like he replaces it in like a weird reverse order. You know, or sort of like scatters it about almost randomly, so that when you take it all in the linear style that a song plays, you don't necessarily connect all the dots because it's not happening one after the next. You know, you have a clue that might make sense with a line toward the beginning of a track, toward the end of the track, you know, and then finally, like, when you pull it all together and you get the greater context of everything, you finally figure out what the song's about and the point that he's trying to make. Sometimes it's more obvious than others, you know, like on Source Awards, like on Everybody Knows, like on Groundhog's Day, like on Nomento. You know, but still, you know, I do kind of love that cryptic quality of Billy's music. I do think it adds a lot to what he does. It makes his music have a lot of replay value. And, you know, on top of it, it just kind of gives his music a certain kind of vibe and tone that no other artist really has.
Yeah. He definitely, it feels like Aesop Rock sometimes when I listen to him a bunch of times. I'm trying to figure out what the hell he's talking about. Yeah. But with Billy Woods, I can never claim to decipher even 50% of what he's talking about. I'll get bits and pieces here and there. But there was one song that I was actually surprised by it being more straightforward than I expect from him, and that was Super Predator.
Yeah.
Which ended up being probably my favorite song on this whole album. But it was still coded, it was still cryptic, but there were lines that were much more blunt that make you walk away saying, okay, I know exactly what he's talking about. Like when he says the whole lean out the car with one eye closed, washing Negroes off the block like a fire hose. And it's like, and then he says the line about Cool G Rap being Frederick Douglass with the Dutch. And it's the bluntness of that song and the darkness of that song that really, really just pulled me in. And the beat worked so well with what he was talking about that's the one jam that I can listen to over and over and over again.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't think either of us are really walking away from this record, you know, that unimpressed with any number of tracks. You know, I mean, obviously,
Right.
Straw Man a little bit. I mean, a couple of hooks to me here and there just felt like, you know, not really that memorable.
Sure.
You know, but outside of that, I mean, this is, I think, one of his most listenable and straightforward and engaging records in a long time. You know, his last record, where he sort of, you know, embarked on a lot of these really weird short rap vignettes, you know, was interesting, but it was like really hulking and difficult to kind of digest, you know, in a lot of ways. You know, Dour Candy had its moments as well. You know, I think it could have ended a little bit better. You know, this to me feels like he's sort of going back to the basics he had on History Will Absolve Me, and he's making a record with just like a lot of strong content that all works together on sort of an individual basis. You know, you could separate each track out of this album and it kind of works on its own merits, you know, not because it's a part of like a greater, grander thematic concept or something like that. He's just kind of hitting you with one great quality track after the next. And, you know, that's part of what makes it so listenable and so fun, because each song's sort of taking things from like a different angle.
Yeah, this definitely feels like his most complete piece of work. I won't say it's his best album, but it definitely feels like this is the one that he wanted to make a complete journey, as opposed to an album full of really dope songs. This is an album full of songs that feel like they each one had a distinct purpose.
Yeah, exactly. Which is very much what I liked so much about History Will Absolve Me. You know, so it kind of feels like he's going back to that a little bit, but with obviously, you know, a different approach to hooks and, you know, a different approach to production too with Blockhead, you know, on the beats on this thing, because he's obviously going to bring a way different vibe, you know, than Billy had on History. So, you know, overall, I'm loving the record. I'm really liking it. And, you know, probably going to be one of the best underground releases, in my opinion, of the year. I'm feeling a decent, strong 8 on this thing. I imagine you're probably, you know, vibing off this thing too then.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the best things I've heard this year. Dead in Hip Hop, we just filmed our mid-year best of rap projects, excuse me. And this would have been in there had it come out a little bit earlier. But I definitely see it being on my list at the end of the year.
Okay, cool. All right. Oh, that's some insider info. Just
dropping the jewels on y'all, man. Sprinkling it.
Like the salt.
Yeah, man.
Got it. Like the Salt Bay. Got it. You really brought the memes in this review. You really brought that meme. You brought it up in the back.
You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to fit in. That's all that is.
All right, I want to thank Myke Seatown for coming on and talking with me about this Billy Woods record. Check out his channel. It's linked down there below, along with the Dead End Hip Hop channel, of course. And I will catch you guys in the next review very soon. Myke, again, thanks for coming on. You want to say anything before we go?
Thanks for inviting me, man. I appreciate it.
Billy Woods, Known Unknowns. Link to Billy Woods' music and website down there in the description as well. Eat your fruits and vegetables. Stay vegan. Stay vegan. Forever.
All day.